The Me&Him podcast.
Hi son, how's it going on this lovely sunny Saturday morning?
Which day is it, Dad?
That's a problem for retired people to sort out.
When you're retired, it's all Saturday or Sunday or Wednesday.
Yeah, I seem to live in an eternal Saturday.
Oh my God, I'm so jealous.
Don't know what the public holidays are. Don't care.
Well, it's funny. A friend of mine said to me at work, actually said, "Look, I'm just looking forward, to forgetting which day it is because then I know I'm on holiday." And I thought, what a great marker. And then I think it was over Christmas, where I was like, is it Thursday or Friday? And I'm like, oh, I'm on holiday. So now it's got stuck in my head like a brain worm, I'm like, all right, as soon as I forget what day it is, it must be on my official holiday, celebrate. Anyways.
Oh, well, you've got to be careful about that.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Well, I don't want to celebrate too hard. I can't even think about it right now because I'm a bit worse for wear after a couple of too many vinos last night. So
Naughty.
Yes, I know. I tried to follow your sober example.
All those years I've tried to show you how to do it properly.
Well,
and you failed me again.
In honor of your brand, let's call it your brand, because I noticed for your 80th, I was like, I'm getting this really nice bottle of wine. Like I think he'll really appreciate that. And I even went down to the vineyard, and it was one of the last of that particular bin and everything. I'm like, oh, cool. Paid a lot more than.
I still haven't drunk it, by the way.
Good. You know which one it is.
It's been saved. Yes, of course I do.
But then obviously we were out the next day of your party, and there was like, oh, I wonder what this is. Another bottle of booze, another bottle of wine. Another one. I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize that. I should have connected that everyone's going to give you booze. All right. So I'm not standing out from the pack right now.
Well, that just shows how discerning they are.
And also, a reason I said about your brand is because we've now added in a bottle of wine and a wine glass on our new Me&Him logo as well. So now it's indoctrinated.
Well, it fits with the old fat guy, doesn't it?
Well, I actually made him a bit slimmer. I photoshopped him down. I thought you'd like that.
Oh, yeah.
So what's been on your mind anyway?
Well, I've been thinking about the father and son thing, which we're doing, and I'm loving, by the way.
Cool.
And there are two songs in popular music which have affected me deeply, and they concern father and son. One is Cat Stevens' song on Tea for the Tillerman in the 70s.
Classic.
Called Father and Son. And this is from the point of view of a father trying to give his presumably teenage sons some wise advice.
That's a beautiful song. It's in my head right now. It's just so haunting.
And we fathers, and I'm sure you've had this experience too, learn from experience that it's only at the point that the young person is ready to ask the question, they can hear the answer. Mm-hmm. So if you try and tell them something for their own good and they're not ready for it, it'll be rejected. Because they already know everything about the world and you know nothing.
Yeah, we're just chatting a bit about that, weren't we? Like, 14 or 15, it's amazing how you actually know everything, more than the internet now. Like, you just know everything.
And the other song, which has always brought me to tears, is Mike and the Mechanics of The Living Years. And that, again, is written from the son's perspective. But, it starts with... I wasn't there that morning when my father passed away. I didn't have the time to tell him all the things I had to say. Brings a lump to my throat.
Yeah, I can hear it. And I know you've spoken to me about that before. And you've also spoken even previously on this podcast about trying to have those conversations with your dad.
They're very important. And that's one of the things that you and I are doing now. This is not entertainment. This is us being real with each other and learning from each other, sometimes good things, sometimes painful things, but they need to be expressed because I'm not going to be around too much longer.
Yeah. Well, look, I've always enjoyed our chats, and we have a laugh and we get ridiculous, and then we go very deep, and we often do learn something new and create something new. So let's do that right now, shall we?
Yeah.
You got something good to share?
Well, I will have in a moment.
Good, let's go.
The Me&Him podcast.
So what I've really been enjoying is not only listening to the story of your background and I guess your life, but also being able to share what's been going on with me. But more importantly, as I've listened back to a couple of the podcasts now, the edited versions, very exciting, it's just some of these insights, these collective insights that we gain along the way. I think for me, that's probably what I'm enjoying the most. What about you?
Yes, you can never predict when they're going to occur. I was always a very curious child and intellectually. Remember that I only had myself for company. And I remember one night when I was 13, and I'll never forget that night. I lay in bed and I tried to imagine death.
Oh, wow. So that is... That's a big insight right there. Or did you have an insight around it?
Oh, no, look, I'm just a weird bloody kid, right?
Right. How do you mean? Like, how did you do that?
Well, I'll cut the story short because it's kind of long. Can you remember the bypass in Khyber Pass where there were old graves dating back to the early colonial period?
I do, yeah. I forgot about it actually until you just mentioned it, but yes.
I was thinking about them because I used to wander around, when I was young, because I lived in the city. And so I started with that as a reference point, that I had died and there was some kind of a tombstone or whatever above what once were my mortal remains. And then I thought, well, okay, my children will probably come every so often, and over time it may end up being once every few years, and put some flowers there or whatever. And then I skipped 100 years into the future, and even my grandchildren were very old. And they'd forgotten about Granddad. And fundamentally, I was just an entry in a book.
Wow.
Births, deaths, and
yeah. Insignificant, really.
Yeah. I mean, the body and the remains had long since deteriorated.
You become flowers and plants and stuff.
Well, during that period, they'd also removed all the contents for a new motorway.
Right.
So nothing existed. Mm-hmm. Just an entry in a book. Then 1,000 years in the future, the world has changed remarkably. The books have been burnt or whatever.
Were lost in a flood.
Yeah, and then 10,000 years in the future, the human race.
So you were 12 at this point, you're saying?
No, I was 13.
13, okay.
I'll never forget it.
Right.
And then, because I'd read a lot, I skipped even further.
To the sun exploding?
1 million years into the future.
Okay.
And by that time, no trace of the human race existed whatsoever on Earth. And then about 3 billion years into the future, where the sun was entering its final phase and expands.
And this is the short version.
This is the short. And the three inner planets, Mercury,
swallowed
Venus,
up by the corona or whatever,
and Earth, had been burnt to a cinder. Mm-hmm. So there were just these dead rocks. And then it was about 1 million years after that, I cried myself to sleep, and oh God, did I cry. But funnily enough, and I didn't realize this until I got much older, I've never had a fear of death since that exercise that I put myself through.
Wow.
There are many people my age are struggling with the concept of mortality.
Because you can see the end of the runway, right?
Yeah, well, I can't see the end of the runway.
Well, it's coming.
However, it's been a bloody long runway so far. It's not a fear I have. I just know it's going to happen, and I just don't want it to be uncomfortable.
Wow.
Which is another reason why I'm a firm believer in euthanasia, and have been since a kid.
Yeah, well, that's a prickly subject, but I do understand if someone's in pain and suffering greatly, and there's no real hope. Like we do it to animals, right? Like you just help them out. We think it's okay to do that to animals, but not to humans for some reason. I don't really fully get it, but I agree with you. Yeah. Can I just share something that you just made me think of by telling me
Sure.
that? Firstly,
Sure.
Very interesting that you had done that mental exercise. It's almost like a process in a way to realize that, we are really just one, speck of dust, or floating in the middle of a great thing of vastness of space, etc. We are quite insignificant, and to have that at that age is pretty pretty wild. But I was listening to this podcast by a guy named Joseph Goldstein recently. He's kind of my Bubba Rum Dust replacement, right? And he was talking about...
I must listen to him too.
Oh, you should.
I've always loved Rum Dust.
Yeah. He started with Rum Dust, and he's part of the Be Here Now Foundation.
Wow, yes.
So he's talking about Genghis Kahn, right? And I don't know a lot about Genghis Khan.
I do.
I bet you do, right? But terrifically successful conqueror who completely reshaped, I guess, Europe and Asia, and with the marauding mongrels and what have you. And he made such a massive impact on the world.
They weren't mongrels, they were Mongols.
Okay. I grew up with a mongrel mob in New Zealand.
They behave like mongrels. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. So look, he tells the story about Genghis Khan, all his achievements, and he goes, with that in mind, he goes, how often did you think of Genghis Khan today, after everything he did? And there's a murmur of laughter. And he said, so even the most greatest people who've literally shaped the world have been, in more or less not that far distant history, not as long as we go as the Egyptians and stuff, and we've forgotten about them completely, doesn't get mentioned at all. So why are we so worried about leaving a legacy, making an impact? The reality is we all get forgotten at the end of the day.
Well, Genghis Khan made Vlad the Impaler, who came many centuries after him, look like a philanthropist.
Right, yeah. Pretty brutal times.
These people were merciless.
And the value of life must have just been basically worthless, right?
One of the stories about Genghis Khan is that he conquered an army in a particular location, took them as slaves, and they burnt the eyes out of several hundred men, and they chained them together and they marched them.
Right.
To their ultimate slave destination. Now, that's not someone to be admired.
No. So don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about admiring anyone here, but in terms of, I guess, what you told me about zooming forward and having the sun swallow the earth, and then we have this ego that we walk around with thinking we're special and that we should, yes. and we got to be,
Isn't
remembered.
It so small in the great
people are so worried about, what are they thinking of me, and everything, my image. And then it's like, well, believe me, no one really cares, right? Yeah.
The universe doesn't give a rat's.
They don't give a shit. It's just you and your pathetic little ego thinking you're the center of your own universe. And so look, yes, I just had to. It just came to mind when you were sharing that we all get forgotten. But anyway, talk to me more, because you did mention the last episode about transitions and how your life had been a series of transitions. Was that one of them? The sort of transition?
Yes, it was. Yeah. I didn't realize how formative it was, and that impacted upon my relationships with other young people. You know how you're so conscious of becoming part of your peer group, and particularly teenage parties with young girls and so forth. I was a very late developer because I thought everybody wanted to talk about life, death, and the universe. And they didn't. They just wanted to dance to rock and roll and do what the hormones dictate.
Right. Yeah, okay. So you did mention that last episode, just about that little awkwardness, I guess. I think I actually called that segment of awkward dad, just like stumbling through, that sort of trying to have conversations with people who aren't really on the same wavelength as you were.
Well, no brothers and sisters, so I didn't know how to do it.
It must not be uncommon.
Actually, I've never thought outside my own paradigm, but now that you mention it, son, I guess there are other young people who have difficulty connecting because they haven't had the tit-for-tat exchanges which go with having siblings.
Yeah, I have looked at the whole birth order pseudoscience, they call it, before, where the oldest child is bestowed more responsibility, younger age, often has to look on the younger children, so is used to responsibility, becomes more likely to be a leader or what have you, whereas the younger child I know what it's like having a few kids, younger child's like, he's coughing, with the oldest child, it's like, you got a little cough. It's like, oh my God, let's keep him home from school and give him some cough medicine and go take him to the doctor in the hospital. Whereas your third child, your fourth child's, coughing, you're like, you'll be right, champ, just, you'll sort yourself out.
It's part of the process.
If you start coughing,
get uptight about it.
If you start coughing blood, we'll head to the ER, but otherwise. So there is a sort of a different demand set for the older kids versus, I was a middle child versus the younger child. But for an only child, you miss a lot of that. It's all full download from the parents, isn't it? As you're for the first, dozen or so years.
Yes, very much so. Which is the reason why when I was 18, I had to leave home, even though I was on a cushy number, only child, my parents looking after me, etc. The psychological pressures were just too enormous. And I had a girlfriend at the time, and she helped me facilitate that.
The Me&Him podcast.
Well, I have been curious, Dad, about that time, I guess, going to university and your life around then. I don't know a lot about it, but you did mention just then about escaping home with the help of a female accomplice, a girlfriend. Tell me a little bit more about that. Put some colour around that.
Well, we met at university, and I was studying on my first year chemistry, mathematics, applied mathematics, physics, the usual.
Yeah, really interesting.
And I decided to do a second degree because I had this feeling that came from nowhere that the world needed generalists. And remember, we were moving into this, we were in the early 60s at that point. Mm-hmm. And I thought people who are qualified in at least two different dimensions have an ability to look outside the box.
I totally agree with that.
And
that's something Elon Musk talks about, with mastering two different occupations.
So I took a second degree at the same time. This is in my second year. And I worked out, actually, if I continued studying and passing my papers, that I could get 2 masterates in the 5 years that is normally allocated for one. I failed because I got involved with student life.
Okay.
And, sex and drugs and rock and roll.
Oh, you finally got there. Oh, I was wondering where that was going.
Yeah. Well, I had to mature at some point,
Lose your way, stray from the path.
Yeah. So but the second degree I had in mind was psychology. Mm-hmm. I couldn't do that because it clashed with my laboratory periods for physics and chemistry. So I ended up doing philosophy, which was the best thing which could have happened to me.
Right. Because
retrospectively, as an older male, I realized that my need to take, my desire to take psychology was because I knew subconsciously I was fractured inside, and I thought by learning how to heal other people, I could heal myself.
Wouldn't they say? Teach what you most need to learn, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Anyway, it didn't happen, and I had to do the hard yards myself. And the various ladies in my life were very helpful, and I owe them a great debt.
So how did this girlfriend help you get out of that situation?
Well, we started to fall in love, as you do at that age. And she realized how negative an influence my father was. And he was, in a sense, crushing me psychologically. I didn't realize how bad it was. Remember, I was an only child. I didn't have any other reference points. So with her assistance, with her helping me gain the courage to make the move, I did it. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, although instead of being provided for by my parents and living with my parents and going to university and being looked after, I had to look after myself. And that meant I took a job late at night, way after university. It started at midnight in the circulation department of one of the big newspapers. And
At midnight, so what were the hours? So midnight to when?
normally midnight to 3, but on Tuesday night, because of the weekly news which came out, which is a national magazine that was distributed right through the country, we would work through till about 10 a.m., sometimes midday the next day.
Wow. And so your studies just fitted around that or something? Or they would?
No, I just went straight to university.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there was a period where in the middle of summer, wearing corduroy trousers, which were the fashion in those days, having a T-shirt underneath a shirt, underneath a jersey, underneath an overcoat.
Yeah.
I was wandering around in the middle of the day, shivering because of the sleep deprivation. I mean, sometimes I go 3 days without sleep.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Unfortunately, you haven't changed too much. It's just one day now, like as you've gone.
Yeah, I know. I'm so old. I mean, I've lost it, son. It's time. I got to go.
Yeah. Well, you'll be able to sleep forever soon, so don't worry too much. So can I just interject here? I wanted to share something similar sort of vein. You know this quite well because I was working for you, as being the bastion of bad habits. I was working for you as a bartender at Martha's Corner, which was a jazz cafe that you ran and you built, basically. And
well, I owned it.
You owned it. And you get.
And I didn't realise you were giving all your mates free drinks.
You keep saying that, but no, I think that came later. That was down when you had the Brat nightclub where I was giving them free drinks, by the way. But anyways, so back to Martha's Corner.
Oh, so it's confession time.
Yeah, I remember when the Black Russians. I discovered Black Russians, right? Where I was like, okay, so you got vodka, which is a hard liquor, with some Kahlua, which makes it sort of sweet and tasty, with some Coke, which is also sweet, and it goes down like lolly water, but it gets you hammered. I'm like, yeah, I'll get one of them for me and 3 for my mates, thanks. And I'm sure when you got the bill, you were horrified at the fact. Also, I was underage as well, so. Lots to.
I was even more horrified.
Yeah. Anyway, I won't try to get you into too much more trouble, but next door to Martha's Cafe was another, I think it was an Italian restaurant. I can't remember. I was up there on Victoria Street. It was another restaurant that you could have a connecting door to. Right, and anyway, that's where I met one of my first major loves, a girl named Laurel, and she and I became fast friends.
We all liked Laurel.
Yeah, she was awesome.
She's a lovely girl.
Yeah, and so we kind of started going out and sort of became a boyfriend girlfriend, and it wasn't until we had that relationship where I got the courage to go. I was already living out of home, I think, at that age, or not quite actually at that age. Maybe I shifted out, I think, when I was 17. But after being with her for a while, that's where I got the courage to go, right, I need to leave this country. I need to go traveling. And but I didn't want to do it on my own. I wasn't one of these people who could just pack a backpack and disappear and, travel the world. Like a number of people I know, I needed, I guess, a bit of a safety blanket, and it just was a perfect opportunity. So we then escaped, I guess, the situation that was Auckland City in those times. It certainly wasn't yielding much for me, and started a new life over here. I mean, we didn't last for more than a year or two, I think, after that. But the reality was that she helped me make that shift, I guess, as well. That was the point I was making. And sometimes you do need someone to give you a reason or a nous, or to help you see things the way they are, or in your case, obviously, it was escaping a dysfunctional family dynamic. Mine was more just I needed to get out of that place to sort of, I guess, find myself a little bit.
Or spread yourself around.
Yeah, or learn some lessons, and certainly, well, that was the beginning of a lot of different lessons, I guess. So, it's got 100 years worth of podcast in that one, but yeah. So that was my story. So talk to me more then about the getting through uni or uni life. If you had to look after yourself, you're saying you had to balance the job, the studies, big degrees.
Uni life was very interesting.
I mean, you got your degree in the end, didn't you?
I got both of them.
You got both of them, yeah.
It took a while.
Okay.
It took much longer than I anticipated because, life has these interesting twists and turns. There's a suburb in Auckland, which was my home, called Mount Eden. And at that stage, Mount Eden was fairly run down. But there were big old houses that people of influence used to have before they moved to another more elite area.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 of us took a 5-bedroom house, and we had some amazing parties.
I knew that's where that was going. I just knew that. So when you say amazing parties,
well, the biggest one of all,
mm-hmm.
there were so many people there that in order to move from one part of one room to another, I had to climb out of a window, walk along the outside of the house, and open the window. Well, the windows were open because there were so many people, and crawl in and see what was going on.
I can just visualize that, to be honest. That would be
and
hilarious.
This was my party, but the word had spread because it was during university capping, where the 3 main universities in the North Island came together on a rotational basis and had, sporting contests and drinking contests and all that sort of thing. And the word had gone out. So at age, I must have been about 19 at that stage. I think that was when I met your mother. Midnight, I called the cops on my own party in my own house or my own rental.
Wow. And that's the days before you could send text messages out or social media, sharing the invite. It was just word of mouth, huh? Old school. Not even.
Oh, word of mouth was very, very powerful. And they came, and I identified myself. I said, I'm the guy who has the lease here.
These are my people.
Uncontrollable.
Yeah.
Let's break it up.
Right.
Which we did.
Yeah.
And when the bottle-os came the next day, because there used to be a service, with a truck, and they'd pick up all the bottles, but it was the beer bottles. They got 140 dozen bottles of the old-fashioned quart-size bottles of beer.
Like the ones of once were warriors, right? Like the big.
Yeah, and that was not
DB.
counting the sea of wine bottles and spirit bottles.
Well, and here we are celebrating 80. You turning 80. It's amazing. It's amazing you made it.
How did I get here?
Oh my
How
God.
did I survive my life?
You definitely need a medal. Well, that's cool. I like that. That gives me a bit of an understanding, not so much about your misspent youth, but just the environment there at the time and the hijinks, and also I guess the industriousness to actually continue to keep focused to get a degree. You did better than me in that regard, that's for sure. I got into hospitality and I got out of uni, which is not an uncommon story.
Yeah, well, I set you a bad example again, son.
Well, it wasn't your example. We're all responsible, sentient human beings, right? We've got to make decisions for ourselves. So,
that's so cliche. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, I keep telling myself that. Hopefully, one day I'll
I
believe
mean, it's true, but I mean, people tend to trot it out at any excuse.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to going into the next section, which is our famous emails from Dad.
Emails from Dad.
So I mentioned last episode that I had managed to unencrypt, is that a word, or decrypt the files that I couldn't get into and find the stored emails from Dad, the treasure trove of old emails that I put.
Oh, wow, thank God they're not lost forever.
Yeah, that's right. Like I feel like Atlantis, I found them. And I was looking through them, obviously I was looking through them just talking to you earlier, and one popped up that had the actual subject father in it. I thought I'll open this one up because I PDF'd them all. This one's from April the 13th, 2021, so a few years ago now. And I got to admit, I don't know if I read it, or if I did read it, I didn't follow it up, but it was about, you wrote here, a well-deserved Oscar nomination for Anthony Hopkins starring as Anthony, an elderly father suffering from dementia. And then you just had a couple of lines about how great it was. And I thought, this ties into the topic of our podcast. So, and I haven't seen it either. So tell me about this movie.
Well, you should see it, son. Not to assist the father-son dialogue, but to gain an understanding of a disease which is hideously transforming and killing so many elderly persons. And funny enough, it's not just elderly, but it's the highest percentage are, mature people. And that's dementia.
It pretty much is the brain like shrinking, isn't it? And being like basically rotting.
I don't know the actual physiological processes, son, but is a deterioration of the brain whereby you, in the early stages, your memory goes with respect to, things like family members and so forth, what you did yesterday, your thinking patterns shrink. And in its worst form, and I've had 2 or 3 friends die from this, you have no control over your bodily functions and you die an awful, messy, sad, disgustingly horrible death.
Hence your stance on euthanasia, I guess, in those situations, yeah?
No, euthanasia, I agree it applies. But you see, people in the advanced stages of dementia don't know. Their critical thinking faculty shrinks to zero. And the power of the movie was that Anthony Hopkins is the father in this particular situation, and he's suffering from dementia. And what happens, the first part of the movie, and I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, is his daughter's looking after him, and they have a caring relationship in the sense that she helps care for him as well. And that's fine for about 10 minutes. Then all of a sudden, it just shifts. Bingo. It's like a different movie, but with the same people. And they have different relationships, like she's married at this point, and he's feeling kind of left out and so forth. And it wasn't until the second shift finished that the penny dropped in my head. This movie has been directed and focused from inside his head.
Right.
And
so
is
it's
showing
disjointed.
us his reality.
Interesting.
And his reality shifts as the disease progresses.
Wow. It's pretty good filmmaking.
And that's the power of it. And then you really understand the last half.
Okay.
A brilliant actor.
It's kind of like, what was that one where I See Dead People? The Bruce, I think it's Bruce Willis in it. The name eludes me, but the whole time you're watching the movie and then you realize at the end, it's seeing the guy who's the protagonist in this, he's actually the one who's dead and he was the ghost, and it flips it around completely. That's a great, well, I'm glad I found that email, Dad, because I'm going to watch that maybe even tonight. I always love a good recommendation, and I'm still a bit dusty, so
it's a wonderful movie, son, and it's incredibly powerful, and it's insightful. You learn an enormous amount.
Brilliant. All right, thanks for that. That was a pretty helpful email.
The Me&Him podcast.
Well, it's been great chatting again, Dad, and I'm going to head out and maybe have a bike ride now. What are you up to for the rest of the day?
I've got a friend coming around with my fancy turntable, and fortunately he's a bit of a guru, so he can fix some of my electronic problems.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I hear you got a new camera and stuff, so
yeah,
be interested to see how that looks, and let me know, because I might get one myself, because we're going to be on TikTok, maybe.
It wasn't cheap, but it was the best one that they had, and I've got a friend.
When you say it wasn't cheap, how much?
Over $200.
Ooh, $200 webcam. Jesus. Fancy. All right. Well, yeah, I'll be interested to see how that goes. So, look, we're going to catch up again and do another one of these tomorrow. The recommendation for the movie, I appreciate that. Glad I found that, because that's going to be my night tonight. And also interesting just to hear about that period of your life getting into uni. I think next episode we're really up to Mum, aren't we? Up to how you guys met and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, we're right up to when I met your mother.
Cool, and we got to keep it PC, right? We got to, only tell
I'm
the proof
going to
stories.
give you all the gory details. Oh,
No, not,
I
don't mean it
really
that
want
way.
to shock my family.
Yeah, well, Mum might be listening to this, all right? So we'll just.
Oh no, I'm not going to do it.
No, it's all right. I know you'll be kind, and obviously that was such an important part of your life, and hey, shit, that's why I'm here. So I'm grateful. Okay, well, you enjoy your visit from your mate, your electronic stuff. I'm going to take a bike ride, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Look forward to that, son. Thank you.
The Me and Him podcast.